Джим, вы затронули тему гражданской войны.
You have touched the
И ведь на
topic of
самом
civil
деле
war, and
вы как
truly,
человек, который находится в среде
you as a
Америки, вы
person
знаете,
that
что
live
культура
in America, you understand the culture
постапокалипсиса,
and
компьютерные игры, фильмы, в том
it's
числе
like the
недавно вышел
apocalyptic
в
nature
25-м
of,
году,
you
в
know,
прошлом году была
movies that
гражданская
we
война,
had on the Civil War,
огромное количество оружия
huge
на руках
number of
населения,
weapons
которого
that
больше, чем
civil people
жителей,
have more than there are civilians.
питание, бомбоубежище, это целая индустрия.
Food, that's you
Когда
know,
начинаешь
shelters, that's
погружаться,
a
ты видишь,
whole
что люди
industry.
живут
When
вот в
you
этом
dive
состоянии,
into it, you
что если
understand that
завтра
people
наступит
live
хаос,
in
они
that
будут
state.
выживать. Они
If
объединяют
something happens
специальные
to more,
коммуны,
that people will
машины
start to
бронированные и так
survive.
далее.
There's special cars
Насколько
that they buy,
разделение
create
между
special villages.
республиканцами и
What
демократами,
is the
вы,
difference
если, я так
and the
понимаю, в
division
партии
between
республиканцев находитесь,
Republicans and
насколько
Democrats? Do I
идеологически это
understand
серьезно
correctly that
сейчас?
you in the Republican
Насколько
Party? Is that
демонстрации против
serious?
федеральных служб
The
в тех
demonstrations that
городах,
they
куда
have,
их
the
выводят,
riots against the government
сильны?
and where the police
Настолько ли
comes in,
близка
how
Америка
strong it
вот к
is,
этому вооруженному
how
противостоянию, или
close
это
America is
пока
that to the
внешне выглядит, и это на
fight
самом
with
деле
the
не так?
guns, with weapons? Is that real or not?
I'm sorry to say, I think it is real. It's not so much Republicans and Democrats, it's more existential than that. I mean, if you look at our last Civil War in the 1860s, Americans, both in the North and the South, they prayed to the same God, they read the same Bible, they honored the same founding fathers, they claimed loyalty to the same principles of government. And today in America, we don't even agree on what a woman is. We don't even agree on what it means to be a human being and what the fundamental values of human society are. And this is something that's well beyond Republicans and Democrats. This has to do with just even what it means to be a human being, much less what it means to be an American. And I think a lot of people are increasingly scared on both sides. And mostly it's people on the right who have weapons because that is actually a traditional American value. I mean, it's one of the things that's right in the American Constitution, in the Second Amendment. And of course, the First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, and so forth. And we have a saying here in America that there is no First Amendment without the Second Amendment, that you can have all the paper rights in the Constitution about speech and so forth, but they don't mean a thing unless you're armed and able to defend yourself. And so I think this, and again, many people in other countries would not agree with this. This is not one of the values that their country is founded on, but for many Americans it is. Against that, though, you have the power of the state. You have increasingly militarized police forces all around the countries. I mean, you have police forces in America that are armed like military units, like armies are in other countries. And nobody is quite sure against whom these weapons will be turned. Right now, when you see militarization in some of the cities with the National Guard, with the Immigration Service, it seems to be directed mostly against the left because Trump is in power, but that could just as easily be turned around, depending on who controls the federal government in the future. Again, it's something that nobody knows quite how this will turn out. And I think a lot of people, if they do see a pre-Civil War type circumstance brewing in the United States, it won't be like the last one in the 1860s with nice, neat lines of boys wearing blue uniforms or gray uniforms. It will be more like a Bosnia or a Lebanon. It'll be street by street, house by house, county by county.
Ну, нам как членам клуба,
Us as members of the
которые
club that
хотят, чтобы был мир во всем
want to
мире,
have peace in the
дружба
whole
наций,
world,
народов, надеемся, что
friendship of
Америка избежит
nations, we
этого
really
сценария, не
hope that
погрузится в этот
America would
хаос,
avoid such
потому что
scenario, this
гражданская
chaos,
война — это
because
страшно.
civil war,
Россия пережила одну
it's a
гражданскую
tragedy.
войну,
Russia
и
went
то,
through
что сейчас
one civil
происходит на
war,
Украине, это
and what
вторая
takes
гражданская
place
война,
now in
потому
Ukraine is
что
another
с той
civil
стороны
war,
такие же русские люди,
because
они выглядят
same
так же,
Russian
они
people,
говорят
they
на
talk
русском
the
языке.
same language
Джим,
on
как
the
в
other side
Америке
of the
относятся к
barricade, and then
украинскому конфликту?
How
как в
does
Америке
America
относятся
look
к
at the
Зеленскому.
Ukrainian
Потому что Трамп
conflict? How
сегодня
do they,
сказал,
what
что
do they say
Зеленского
about
нету
Zelensky?
козырных карт, у него
Because
есть
Trump
только я.
says
Только я
he
ему могу помочь
that
надавить на
Zelensky doesn't
русских.
have
И
any cards.
в этой ситуации мы понимаем, мы в России
And in this
пытаемся
situation, we understand in Russia,
надеяться,
we try
что
to
то, что, о
we
чем
try to
договорились
hope that
президенты в
what they
Анкоридже, оно
talked
еще
in
сохраняет
Anchorage is
актуальность.
still having some life to it. What do you think?
Well, I'm glad you did mention that this essentially is a civil war, if you will, within the Rus as a larger people of three countries, Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine.
Мгм.
Sometimes you'll hear Americans very cynically say that during World War II, we should have encouraged the Soviet Union and National Socialist Germany to fight, that the more Russians and the more Germans that died, the better for us. Well, frankly, I think some of them look at the war in Ukraine the same way, that whether they're wearing Ukrainian uniforms or Russian uniforms, that everybody dying is an Orthodox Rus, and that is a net plus for us. And the longer this war goes on, and the more Ukrainians die, and the more Russians die, that's actually a big plus for America, because the Russian world, as Mr. Putin calls it, is dying demographically with every one of these men who dies. Um, and I think it's a great tragedy. And of course, Mr. Rubio has even admitted that the war in Ukraine is an American proxy war against Russia. I think a lot of people focus on the little shadow fights between the Europeans and Trump and say, oh, there's a big division between the two of them. No, there's not. A lot of this is for show. Pete Hegseth has even said, the Secretary of War, as he calls himself now, Pete Hegseth has even said that this is just about division of labor. We want to force the Europeans to bear the burden of this war while we go off to fight the Iranians or the Chinese or whoever else. And that's the real purpose of all this pretend fighting between the Europeans and the Americans, to keep the war going as long as possible, to spill as much Orthodox Russian blood as possible. And that's what this is really about. Unfortunately, the way, and this maybe will offend some people, but the way Russia has fought this war, instead of targeting the Kiev regime, instead of targeting the SBU and the presidential administration and the command and control structure, the war is in terms of attrition. How many Ukrainians can die to weaken the Ukrainian state and the Ukrainian army? Yes, that will eventually result in victory, but it will be a kind of a Pyrrhic victory, because that, as you say, is a civil war. You're killing off more and more of your own people who are being controlled by a hostile puppet regime controlled by the Western powers. Of course, Zelensky is meaningless. I mean, Mr. Kolomoisky put him in power in the first place. He is essentially an asset of MI6. Of course, he's not the only, who's Mr. Bonanov might succeed him, perhaps. Okay, he's a CIA asset instead of an MI6 asset. I mean, these so-called leaders in Kiev are simply puppets of the Western powers. The only real people with any agency in Kiev are the armed Nazi Banderists who have a very interesting relationship with the West, just like our jihadist friends in places like Syria have an interesting relationship with us. But again, I think that the illusion that exists, it still seems, even some people in Moscow, they can make a deal with Mr. Trump, is a very dangerous illusion and can only hurt the Russian world even more.
Kimir.
Сейчас, когда мы смотрим
Now
количество наемников,
we have
иностранных
a lot
наемников
of
на
those,
территории Украины,
we look
с
at the
той стороны,
foreign
со стороны
soldiers that are
украинской
fighting on
армии,
the Ukrainian
мы видим,
army.
что в
We
плен к нам
see that
попадает огромное количество
there's a great number of
бойцов из наркокартелей
fighters from
Колумбии,
the
Мексики,
drug
других регионов.
cartels,
Они специально их
Colombia,
отправляют для
Mexico. They
получения
send them on
боевого опыта
purpose to
с
get this
применением
military
FPV-дронов.
experience using drones.
Они учатся самым
So they
передовым методом
learn on the
ведения борьбы. Понятно, что Трамп сейчас
techniques,
получил
modern techniques. We see that
определенное
Trump now got
состояние
a euphoria
по
about
Венесуэле, но с
on
нашей точки
Venezuela, but from
зрения это
our
была
point of view,
операция,
this is the
наверное, с
operation
ослабленным противником. Вы
with
знаете,
a
как вакцина,
very
когда тебе
weak
уколят, а там полуживой
enemy.
вирус.
where you
Потому
have
что
a
мы видели, что
half-alive
по
virus
американским
where
вертолетам не было
an
не пущено
American
ни одной
helicopter, not
ракеты,
one
по
rocket
ним не
was against
стреляли.
one helicopter.
Суперсовременные системы
Nobody
ПВО
shot.
российские вообще стояли на складах, их даже не вывели на боевое дежурство. То есть
The
это был чистый
beautiful
sаботаж.
Russian
И
rocket
если бы там
system
было
were at the
противостояние,
warehouses
они бы не
shut
смогли туда
down.
даже залететь.
But you
Сбили
know,
бы
there
и
was
самолеты, и
another
вертолеты,
state, there
и
would be
не дали
something
бы
different.
возможности
Nobody
выгрузиться.
would be allowed even to
И
disembark from the helicopters.
в этом
So,
контексте ведь
in this
самую
context,
большую
the
угрозу
biggest
сейчас
threat
для
that
безопасности
is
США
for the
представляют
national security of the United
наркокартели
States, there's
Мексики.
drug
Это
cartels in
большие
Mexico.
вооруженные
These are
группы,
huge
современные, с большим
groups
финансированием,
with modern
против которых
financing
Трамп
and
сейчас планирует
equipment that
запускать бомбы,
Trump is
ракеты,
starting to
и
get
они
bombs
будут
and rockets
сопротивляться. Их нельзя
against
будет
them.
купить как охрану
You know, you cannot buy
Чавеса
them
или каких-то
like
других министров. Там
the
совершенно
defense
другая
system of
жесткая иерархическая система,
in
когда
Venezuela.
смерть
Otherwise, these are private people
за
that are
любой
fighting for
проступок.
their land or for whatever
Американцы
they do.
понимают, что
And
очень много
Americans
вооружений
understand that there's a lot of
высокотехнологичных,
weapons,
те же
high
джавелины
technology
или
weapons, those are
стингеры,
javelins
как
or
раз
stingers.
уехали туда,
They left
на
there
Украины. И
from
там
Ukraine,
еще американцам
and
предстоит много работы.
Americans still have a lot of work there. So, what would you say, comment on that?
Well, it's hard to know how this will go. It's possible that Trump would embark upon some military action in Mexico regarding the drug cartels, but you have to wonder what lies under that. You know, we seized Maduro based on claim that he was responsible for drug smuggling into the United States, which of course is a total lie. It's like our lies about Saddam Hussein and his weapons of mass destruction. Everybody knows that the biggest drug trafficking organization in the world is the CIA, that has very close ties to all these drug cartels. That during, for example, the wars in the 1980s in Central America, that the CIA was very involved in cocaine smuggling into the United States as part of it's just part of the way it does business. We did the same thing in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War with Air America, which is a CIA-controlled airline that was created for that purpose. That yes, we can talk about the drug cartels, and obviously we have a very bad impact of various drugs like OxyContin or fentanyl in the United States. How that translates into the American government's official relationship with the drug cartels, both hostile and negative, is not a simple binary. Oh, this is bad, we must destroy them. It's the same kind of relationship we have with various Salafist Sunni jihadists in the Middle East, where after 9/11, oh, we have to fight Al Qaeda, we have to fight the terrorists, except that we mostly overthrew moderate or secular Arab regimes and replaced them with jihadist regimes, with Al Qaeda or with ISIS, while we pretend to be fighting those very same organizations. We are the biggest supporters of international drug trafficking. We are the biggest supporters of the most violent Sunni Salafist terrorist organizations in the Middle East. At the same time, we are pretending to fight them. So how it will work out with Mexico and the drug cartels there and the relationship they have with the various intelligence agency in the United States, I'm not in a position to predict.
Джин, позвольте тогда вопрос внутриполитический
allow me
задать.
this question on the
Для
internal
нас, для
politics
россиян,
for us,
может быть,
for
и для
Russians,
европейцев,
and maybe for
очень
Europeans.
непривычно
It's not
видеть
quite usual
в
to see
высокоразвитой,
in a high
высокотехнологичной
developed,
Америке,
high
она
technological
действительно
America, and
очень
it's
красивая,
truly a
разнообразная страна
beautiful,
с
with
трудолюбивым
different
народом,
colors, with the people that love to
просто
work.
страшные улицы гетто,
It's ghetto
где
streets where
наркоманы,
drug
продавцы
addicts and
запрещенных
drug
веществ в
dealers,
палатках, это
they are
выглядит
in a
как зомби.
tents. It looks like a
И их
zombie
никуда не
city,
увозят, их не
and
уводят
nobody takes
лечиться.
care of them. They don't take them to the
Огромное количество
hospitals.
ветеранов
A number
армии
of
живут под
veterans from the
мостами.
U.S. Army
Бездомных
live under
людей
the
такое
bridge.
количество. У
Homeless
нас в
people.
России на улице
A
можно
lot more
встретить, но
than in
это
Russia.
редкое
You know, it's a
исключение.
rare thing where
А
you
тут
see
целые
homeless
заброшенные
people
улицы.
in
Почему
Russia.
власть ничего не
How
делает?
come government
Почему
doesn't
власть
do anything?
не
How
борется
come
с распространением
government is not
наркотиков
fighting
внутри
with the
Америки?
spreading of
Мы
the drugs
слышим
inside of
заявление
America?
Трампа,
We
что
hear
я
what
буду
Trump
наказывать
says, that I
Канаду,
will
потому что
punish
они продают нам
cartels
наркотики.
because they
Так
in
закройте границу.
Canada that sells drugs to us. Well, then close the gates,
Делайте так,
close
чтобы
the border,
наркотики на
do
улицах нельзя
something
было
that
продавать.
drugs won't
А в
be able
Америке
to
это
be sold
очень
on the streets.
распространенная и
But it's
достаточно,
quite
такая
developed in
криминальная
America.
среда.
It's a criminal atmosphere there.
I think criminal atmosphere sums it up. I can't describe it any better than that. Look, Andre, I don't know what to tell you. I'm over 70 years old. I remember America, what it used to be like. My father was a military officer, a fighter pilot. He was the Air Force attaché in Moscow at the same time that I worked at the USSR desk at the State Department. I grew up with the identity of this country as it used to be, the values of this country it used to be. All of that is eroded. All of that is collapsing. And there are many reasons for it. A lot of it has to do with the importation of tens of millions of people who are not Americans, will never be Americans, who simply want to take advantage of a system that will provide them with wealth that they have not earned. We also have this takeover of our government that has been ongoing for decades, where corporate and foreign interests control the government, and financial interests control the government, and the welfare and the well-being of the American people simply is not something important to them. It's simply a resource that they can exploit for their own interests. And at the same time, these developments have conspired to destroy what's left of any sense of American identity, that there is simply nobody who can stand up and say, no, this will not be permitted, that we must defend our people and our institutions and our values because we simply don't have any values that we all share anymore. And I don't know how you put that back together. And that's why I think we're facing this kind of a very bleak future, which unfortunately is likely to turn violent in the not too distant future.
Джим, и если позволите, еще один вопрос для
Jim, and
уточнения.
one more question to specify a couple
Россия
of
сейчас
things. Russia
находится в
right now
состоянии
is in a
войны с
state of
коллективным
war
Западом.
with collective West.
У нас очень большой военный
We
бюджет, мы
have
тратим много
huge
денег
military
на
budget. We
вооружение,
spend
на
money for
зарплаты,
weapons,
на
for
обеспечение.
salaries,
Это
for
дорого.
provision. It's
Но при
expensive.
этом, если посмотреть
But at
наш
the same
российский
time,
бюджет на
if you look
20,
at
на
the
этот год и на
Russian
следующий, у нас
military
очень
budget
много
this
денег
year, next year,
заложено на
a lot of money we
инфраструктуру
have
в
for
России.
infrastructure in Russia.
Новые школы,
New
новые
schools,
больницы,
new
новые
hospitals,
дороги.
new
Мы
roads.
понимаем, что это надо
We
делать.
understand that we have to
Когда
do
мы
it.
видим Америку,
When we see
кадры из
America,
Америки,
and
у
when we
которой
see
0
movies
километров
or
скоростных железных дорог,
they have 0
0.
kilometers of high-speed
Когда
railroads,
каждый день
where
минимум 3
every
поезда в
day
Америке сходят с
minimum
рельсов с
3
большими
trains get off the
железнодорожными
rails
катастрофами,
with a
потому что там
huge
деревянные шпалы, которые еще помнят
catastrophes, because they
индейцев
still
и
have the
ковбоев.
wooden
Почему
rails that
общество
are laid by the
не говорит
cowboys or Indians? How come
американцам,
society
что
is not
вам
talking
надо
and speaking to
вкладываться
Americans
деньги в
concerning
страну,
investing
не
the
тратить
money
за
into the
границу,
country?
не тратить
Don't
на вооружение,
waste your money
тратиться
outside of
на
America.
благоустройство. Там
Invest your
мосты
money
старые,
into
дороги тоже
America.
требуют ремонта.
Rebuild your
Америка
bridges,
очень сильно
rebuild your
обветшала,
roads.
и американцы,
America is
которые
kind of
сейчас
old
приезжают
right
в Москву,
now,
в
and
Россию,
Americans
они
are now that's
находятся в
coming to
очень
Moscow, to
удивленном
Russia.
состоянии,
They're
потому что
shocked, they're
наши города
surprised
выглядят как
because
будущее.
our cities look like future.
You said, why doesn't America say this? Whose society? Who America? You can't do that unless there's some common consciousness that people share, some common sense of principles and values that people share. And that just doesn't exist anymore. In other words, we have a country that's been broken up into many, many different communities, some defined by race, by ethnicity, by religion, by language, by social class, where they stand in the system of production and the sharing of wealth. And on top of that is what we've referred to earlier in the program, that we have an economy that's not based on production. It's not even based anymore on consumption. It's based on financialization. How can paper or digital assets be spread around for the benefit of those who already have so much anyway? I mean, for example, if you look at as our economy and our infrastructure and everything else increasingly decline, but the stock market is doing great. People are making more money on the stock market than ever before because they're assessing paper assets or digital assets more than ever before. That's what makes the whole system run. And so that's why you get more and more people. Look, I know people who are experiencing already what happened to people in Russia in the 1990s, people who worked all their lives, who have real skills, who actually can produce things, who simply cannot find a job because those jobs don't exist anymore. Nobody pays you for actually producing anything anymore. They pay you for doing things online and shuffling assets around in a way they make money for the people who already have the digital assets. That's the way the system works now. It's nearing its end, but also it relates back to what we said earlier about the global financial system and whether at some point the Russians, the Chinese, and the others will decide it's in their interest to pull the system down, or whether they will keep suspending the system, keep holding it up in the hopes that the United States will finally wake up and smell the coffee and say, oh, this is not working for us. We better change our direction and come to some accommodation. Unfortunately, I don't think we're capable of making that change. I think it's just as the Soviet system was so ossified, so stiff in the arteries, it simply was not capable of making the changes necessary to preserve itself. I think we're undergoing through something similar, that we're in you might say, the late period of Brezhnevite stagnation, going into the period of perestroika to try to shake things up, and instead it's just going to be destabilized. We just cannot make the changes necessary.
Джим, спасибо большое.
Jim, thank
Спасибо
you very
за вашу
much for
откровенность.
you
Я
being
понимаю,
so
что это
open,
не
such an open.
просто
It's not easy to
говорить
speak
реальные
about
факты, то, что вы видите
real
на
facts
улицах.
about the country that you
Для
love,
нас это очень
and
ценно.
for us it's very
Вот.
precious.
И по нашей
And
традиции
as our tradition in
хочется
the
от
club
вас
that we have,
попросить
we
каких-то
would like to get maybe from you
пожеланий
maybe a
тому, как наши
wish,
народы могут
or
сближаться друг с другом,
what would you want
обогащать
to
друг
tell to our
друга
nations, how
культурно,
we can enrich
экономически,
each other,
и
make each other
действительно
better,
выходить на то
economical way,
общество
cultural way,
планетарное,
and to
общество.
come
Все-таки
maybe
мы живем на одной планете. Нам рано
create
или
some
поздно
kind of
придется
society that would
начинать
help our
дружно
plan,
жить друг с
help our
другом.
nations
И
to
мы,
have
наверное, одни из
friendship,
первых, кто
and
это сейчас
maybe
делает, и
we
говорим
could
об
be the
этом.
pioneers that we're talking about that.
Oh, thank you, Andre. I appreciate that. I mean, as you can tell, for me, this is a somewhat emotional issue. It's something that cuts me right in the heart. And I would like at the same time that despite the very bleak picture that I've painted, that there are still many, many tens of millions of Americans who are, as I think most people in Russia and other countries appreciate, are still very open-hearted, very good people, very generous people, very decent people. And I am still hopeful in the long run that after we go through this great ordeal that is very similar to what I think Russia went through in the 1990s, that something good can come out of it. That some kind of America, maybe not on the entire territory of the United States, but at least in some large part of it, can still reestablish itself as a healthy, functioning country based on the human capital that still exists. And much the same way that after its ordeal, Russia managed to put itself back together again. And despite all the threats and challenges against Russia, has managed to become a functioning society, and one which I hope has a bright future, and one that we can have a good relationship with. And if it's not inappropriate, I would also like to add that as an Orthodox Christian, I think one of the bright spots that we're seeing in America today is more and more Americans coming to Orthodox parishes. I mean, it's really remarkable. Nobody's ever seen anything like it in our lifetimes, where we have so many inquirers, so many people showing up, because when everything else you've experienced turns out to be lies, people have to look for things that are true. So, I go to a parish it's a Russian parish, but 90% of the people there are Americans. A few Russians, a few Greeks, a few Serbs, but it's almost all Americans, and that is very, very common in America today. And I hope that's part of the future of what makes America a functioning society again. But we have a difficult road to go through to get there, and I hope with God's help that something good can come from it.
Джим, спасибо большое за
Thank you
такие
very
теплые
much,
слова.
James. It's
Мы ждем вас в России
beautiful
в
words, kind
гости.
words. We're looking forward
Вы
to
увидите,
see you as a
какие
guest in
великолепные
Russia.
монастыри и
You can
храмы
see what
сейчас
kind of
восстановлены,
monasteries
насколько они
and
яркие и
chapels that we
красивые.
have, how they've been
Да, они
restored,
не
how
такие
beautiful
удобные,
they are.
как католические.
Yes,
Там
they're
нет
not
лавочек, где
maybe as
можно сидеть
comfortable as
удобно или
Catholic,
купить
where we
какую-то
don't have the
вкусную еду,
benches,
но
maybe
все,
buy
что вы будете
food, but
видеть, старинные
what you
фрески,
will
будут
see,
вас
the
заставлять
all the
думать и
icons
ментально
that will
обращаться к
make you
Богу.
think about God
Вы
and talk to Him
удивитесь, как
in prayer.
прекрасно
You
выглядит
will be
Москва,
surprised how beautiful
Санкт-Петербург,
Moscow is, St.
насколько они
Petersburg,
безопасны и
how
чистые.
safe they are,
Когда
how
я
clean they are.
россиян
When
спрашиваю про
I
индекс
ask Russians
Роликса,
about
это
the index
международный
of
такой
Rolex,
индекс,
he knows
сколько с
it's like
золотым Роликсом
international.
на руке ты можешь ходить по улице, через
How
какое время
long
у тебя
can
его
you walk
заберут.
with a golden
Они не
Rolex on your
понимают,
hand? They
как это
don't understand.
заберут. У
Well,
нас
what do you
такого
mean they
просто
take it
нельзя
away?
себе
We don't
представить. А
have it.
центр
We don't have it in
Нью-Йорка,
the street. The center of New
Лондона,
York or
счет идет
London,
на десятки минут.
but you
Потом
can call it
какая-то
by
банда
tens of
обязательно тебе
less than
это
an
в
hour.
подворотне попробует забрать.
Somebody will try to take it away
Поэтому
from
еще
you.
раз
So
спасибо и до
again,
новых
thank you
встреч.
for your words, and we'll see you back again soon.
Thank you so much. I was in Russia 2 years ago, went to Sretinsky Monastery, many other places. So I'm very familiar with Russia, but I'm looking forward to coming again in the hopefully not too distant future.
Спасибо, до свидания.
Thank you.